Well, hello, everybody. I am very thrilled to have our next conversation on the Define Yourself show. And let me do a quick intro and introduce you to the speaker. So, as a quick refresher on what the Seidel method and our Define Yourself show is all about, I'm Ellen Seidel, and I'm the CEO of the Seidel method, and it's a multidisciplinary approach to maximizing human potential. And the Define Yourself show, the goal is to have a conversation with captivating, empathetic, and motivating individuals. Damon is absolutely going to fit the bill today. These individuals possess unique ability to tap in and uncover their extraordinary human potential. And I'm sure you've never heard a story like what Damon's going to share with us. We aim to explore human potential at work and beyond from a perspective that really prioritizes us as whole humans before you fill in the roles of employee, business owners, or fill in the blank. And I am absolutely thrilled to have Damon Stoddard here. A quick intro, and then we'll get him to say a few words of welcome here. With over 25 years of professional experience as a change leader at both Microsoft and Honeywell, Damon Stoddard has a proven history of driving systematic transformational change in organizations and has won numerous awards for his work. And as an aside, we know each other through Xbox and Microsoft. Most recently, Damon earned the reputation of the psychological safety guru at Microsoft. And this was because of his thought leadership in conjunction with the workshops, executive coaching, and keynote speeches that he performed or did, influencing thousands of Microsoft employees. Furthermore, Damon co-created software that is used by more than 2,000 teams across Microsoft and 65,000 organizations worldwide to measure and systematically improve by creating thriving team cultures. So welcome, Damon.
Wow. Wow. Thank you, Ellen. That's pretty good.
It's kind of fun sometimes to hear all your accomplishments, right?
Like, wow. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I'm a tiny habits coach. We're supposed to celebrate. That's part of the, how we get behaviors going and cemented.
Well, I do appreciate it. I mean, just you reaching out and the conversations that we've had, and it's really been honestly very, very humbling and very honoring. And I'm so excited that you just give me the opportunity to share a story that I was reflecting on before our conversation today. And it just, I might not be alive today if it hadn't been
I know
for what I'm going to share today. And it's just so humbling. I might cry a couple times today because
I got my tissues ready. I was thinking
I didn't bring my tissues, but
I know I'm like
wow.
I'm always crying. Bring a Hallmark commercial, I'll cry. But your story is so compelling. And what's so funny is and I was reflecting too. I'm like, in this day and age where we talk about, or maybe this is the old way of thinking about it, work-life balance, or we're burnt out at work. Actually, your job and what your skill set because of your job saved your life, literally. And that's what I think is like so amazing. So let's dig into it. Why don't you share a little bit about your career at Microsoft, and we'll get into the conversation.
Yeah. So I'll even go back. So I went to the University of Washington to get my mechanical engineering degree, and as part of that, I had to figure out how to pay for it. And so I was able to get an internship at Honeywell. And I enjoyed the work so much that I continued working there while I went to college at the University of Washington. And I'd been into work for about 4 years. We were bought by another company, Allied Signal. And they had this thing called continuous improvement that they introduced us to. And they had this thing called Six Sigma. And I thought, that's kind of neat. So in 1995, I changed careers from being a mechanical engineer to being a Six Sigma guy. And I had no idea that was going to define my life and my career. The things that I learned in 1995 through Six Sigma literally established my career and certainly introduced me to people that introduced me to ideas that probably saved my life.
Yeah, that's just amazing. And so we were kind of reminiscing how we were so close to each other during the Xbox years, but not quite, in the same group. And so why don't you share some of what you did at Microsoft, maybe?
Yeah. So I was at Honeywell until 2003. And one of the individuals that I had mentored in Six Sigma worked for the hardware group, and he said, there's an opening in another group for a Six Sigma person. Why don't you interview? And so he introduced me. I interviewed, and in 2003, I started working for Microsoft. And what a dream, man! What a dream working for Microsoft. And it turns out that Microsoft was literally right across the street from where I was going to work, so it wasn't like I had to move. And after a couple of years, I was invited to be in the Xbox group when they were developing the Xbox 360, and they invited me to be a quality manager for the Xbox 360 as they were developing it. And I started kind of looking at what was going on, and I quickly realized that the team was kind of new to data and analyzing data. And I thought I can add some value here. And so I started teaching and training and using data. And I discovered that the test equipment was storing terabytes of data. Really, they were so focused on delivering the product that they weren't necessarily using the data to its full capability.
And maybe that was before the cloud, right?
I think it was actually.
Of it, yeah.
Yeah. And so we launched Xbox 360, and they invited me to China to kind of help improve the quality of the product, and was able to help them use the data to help improve the quality of the product pretty dramatically. And then after a few months, we started having some field returns, and they invited me to lead a team to kind of analyze what was going on there. And I led a team and started discovering the data more. And then one day, after about a year and a half of being out in the market, they invited the corporate vice president of the organization invited me to be a part of a Tiger team because they decided to shut the factory down for Xbox 360 because of the 3 flashing red light issue. And so they invited me to be a part of a team, and I was able to beg for them to give me a data analyst. And so we were able to stitch together the data from the factory to the shipping, to the warehouse, to in use, to Xbox Live. We were able to stitch all that data together. And we were able to quickly kind of tell a story about measurements we took in the factory that impacted the quality in the field. But we didn't necessarily know how to measure the actual failure rate in the field. It's kind of complex. I don't need to go into it. But I had been asked to do a keynote address at a company called Jump. They create statistical software. And I was doing a keynote address, and I thought, we have this quality problem. I need some help figuring out how to measure this. I'm just going to fly to North Carolina, talk to my friends who developed the software there. And I'm in North Carolina, and they said, well, you should use this technique called Kaplan-Meier. And I thought, what's Kaplan-Meier? They said, well, there's a guy by the name of Bill Meeker that developed it. Here's his phone number. Here's his book. So on the flight home, I learned about Kaplan-Meier. I reached out to Bill Meeker. Turns out Bill Meeker helped us analyze the magnitude of the problem, develop the warranty costs. He mentored me and my coworker personally. And over time, we were able to get the quality of the Xbox better than any other consumer product that we're aware of.
So just
using
fun
those same techniques.
This is a little factoid because I think it's kind of fun for where I was in the Oregon. Generally speaking, I'm bad at remembering exactly what project was what year. But I worked on I don't know if this was before they had the 3rd manufacturing facility go up, but yeah. I worked on that. And I also worked on automating the emails. So when Xboxes were returned, the individuals knew like where it was in the process. So that was another. So we were always like so close to each other, but not quite, Yeah.
Then we connected. Then we connected on LinkedIn years later, and
I know.
And, yeah.
So
I saw that. In fact, I remember I saw that you were teaching Tiny Habits, and I thought I just had read the book Tiny Habits, which is probably the best book on habits that I've ever read. Just a little plug for that. Yeah. Unbelievable. The model is incredible.
BJ Fogg is brilliant, and he's so nice. Those of us that have certifications get like office hours. He's a professor with Stanford, so he does office hours for his own students and stuff. But this conversation is so fun. So
in fact, it just occurred to me, just kind of a sidebar, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
But one of the main points of Tiny Habits is make it easy, right? And I cannot believe how easy you have made it for me to be part of this show. I literally clicked a link and here I am on a show. So you're clearly applying the lessons that you learned from Tiny Habits
I don't know.
in
You're
your
good for
company.
my ego, Damon. I might have to keep you around a little bit longer. No, I'm
I
just
remember it's pretty awesome. So
yeah, well, that's a plug to Zinc AI, which is our platform, and developed by an ex-Microsoft guy.
really, well, I love
Yeah,
it.
so,
This is awesome. So anyway, just a little bit more about my journey at Microsoft. So I continued on, became an agile coach, and was part of the Nokia acquisition. They working on the Nokia acquisition. And then July 8th, 2015, my boss calls me into her office and says, "Your job's been eliminated." And I'm like, wow, 12 and a half years at Microsoft, just like that, my job's eliminated. And I could tell she was kind of troubled, but I looked at her and said, it's going to be okay. I'm going to be fine. And she still remembers that. We're still friends today. She still remembers that. So I'm laid off of Microsoft, and I thought, I love Microsoft. I just love Microsoft. If I reflect on Microsoft, I have nothing but gratitude, right? And so I sat down and I wrote a blog, thank you, Microsoft, and goodbye. And that blog went viral. There were more than 30,000 people that saw that blog in just a day or two. And I'm like, that's kind of neat. People really liked it, but it's just kind of who I am, being thankful for situations. And I met with a mentor and he says, Damon, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm not sure. He says, well, you should write a book. And I teared up. I'm like, okay, I should write a book. And so to make a long story short, 45 days later, I wrote my book, Pain Drives Change, which is a story of my journey through childhood trauma and becoming the person I am today. Well, I'm reflecting, okay, what do I want to do for the rest of my life? I want to go back to Microsoft. So I reached out to somebody that I knew. They said, wow, Damon, we read your blog. We love your blog. Our GM said they want people like you on the team. I interviewed. They made a position for me. And I went back to Microsoft 5 months later.
and what was the group?
This was in IT, formerly known as IT. Yeah.
Very
And by the way, I do have to drink water occasionally because of the cancer, which we'll talk about in just a sec.
Yeah, no, you feel free. Yeah, we're just having this is like old home week for you and I.
That's awesome.
And then
This is
our
so fun.
audience will come along with us.
Yeah,
so
it's so fun.
That's how we kind of got reintroduced. I don't know, must have been like, I don't know if it was Facebook, LinkedIn, or something, but I started reading your blogs.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, because, not a lot of people know, but I went through cancer myself. And so, I call myself a thriver. 3 times.
Way to go.
It was kind of like, I kind of felt like God was sending me, he was ringing the bat phone. And like the first time I listened, oh, okay, sure, God. Yeah, I'll change my habits. And then it didn't happen. And then I called the second time. I was like, okay, third time, I've got to figure it out. And I, caught early, so it was very different prognosis than you. But it does make you really reevaluate your life, and you kind of have to I'm just, wisdom's always been one of my big priorities, and so it was so inspirational reading your blog. So tell me kind of the story, pick up where you left off.
Yeah, so I'm back at Microsoft, and I came back to Microsoft saying, I want to come back and do things that are significant. And fortunately, I had a manager that I'll talk a bit more about psychological safety. I didn't know the word then, but a manager that I felt completely safe with. And he created opportunities for me to do really neat things, really, really neat things. Well, unfortunately, I'm back at Microsoft for a couple of years, and my wife has another lump. She had cancer for the second time. And I remembered, fortunately, I'm back at Microsoft, and I think it was Kathleen, who's the head of HR, had shared that she had just put in a new policy of family medical leave for people with family members with cancer. And so I took that time off and was able to be with my wife. And on a side note, we won't go into it too much, but I built a organization called Change University, where I started coaching men who were much like I was in my first book. My wife goes through cancer. She's cancer free. And guess what? 9 months later, I'm feeling on my neck. I have a lump. And I thought, okay, it's just a lump. But because of the experience in life, I said, I'm going to go have it checked out. And so I went to the doctor, and the doctor said, I don't have to worry about it. There's nothing going on. I said, I'm kind of worried about it. He said, well, take some vitamin C and come back in a week. I said, so I took some vitamin C, came back in a week. He says, it didn't go down, but I'm not worried about it. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but I am worried about it. Can we do some more? He said, sure, we'll get an MRI. Got an MRI. He got the results back. He read them and he says, nothing there that I'm concerned about. I said, I am. He said, well, how about if I send you to a specialist? So he sent me to a specialist, and I'm meeting with a specialist, and guess what she says? I'm not worried about it. I said, I am. My wife's had cancer twice. My sister had cancer 2 times, and my mom had cancer. She said, let's do a needle biopsy. And so the lump was right here, and she did a needle biopsy. And she said, I've never in all my years seen something so, such a small lump. I'm not worried about it. A week later, I'm sitting at Microsoft. She says, Damon, are you sitting down? I said, I will. She says, you have cancer. I'm like, oh my gosh. She said, but it shouldn't be a big deal. You got it pretty early. So we'll have surgery. She said the type of cancer I had lymph nodes. I call this scar right here. I'm not sure if you can see it on camera, but I went in for surgery, and they took out the lymph nodes. I say they took out a Stoddard steak, a piece of my flesh. They found cancer in it, but they said that this type of cancer doesn't emanate in the lymph nodes. It emanates in the head and neck. And so they said, we're going to go ahead and take your tonsils out as well, because most of the time it comes from the tonsils. And they took the tonsils out, and she said we didn't find it in the tonsils. Well, somewhere in that journey, when they first mentioned that you have cancer, I said, I just want to write. I want to write about this experience. It helps me process it, and I want to make it available. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but I just want to write. And so I started writing about it, and I started publishing those blogs, and I started getting people saying, wow, this is fascinating. And so in real time, I said, you know what? I'm going to go through cancer. I don't know if I'm going to live or die, but in real time, I'm going to write about it, because maybe I can inspire other people that have a tiny lump to get it checked. And so I kept publishing more.
Especially with the headwinds that you were going against.
Yeah. And so I just kept on writing the blogs, and people kept on saying that they were great. They enjoyed them. And so I just kept going. And I didn't know how long the cancer journey was going to go. I'll share in a bit about that. But that's kind of how the blogs came about. And I'm so thankful now. I'm so thankful now that I wrote them, because I read back at this stuff and I'm like, wow, how did I have so much peace going through cancer for the 3rd time?
Yeah, it's really crazy, because I'll switch back to you in a moment, but this is reminding me of I don't know, there was a lady who was a good friend of mine at the time at Microsoft, and invited like 20, 25 women. And I was just going to talk about my cancer journey. And I didn't want to like have a presentation with PowerPoint slides, so I just like wrote all these like bullet points. And I started out on why I had gratitude for cancer.
Wow.
And it was like, I do have a little, so I remember telling some of the stories like, well, I don't know, my mom would be like, how are you doing? So I'm in the middle of, radiation. I didn't have to go through chemo or anything, but, and my mom's like, how are you doing? I'm like, Mom, have you ever seen a baby go through like 100 emotions in 10 seconds? Yeah. Please don't ask me how I'm doing. And I go, can I tell you what gear I'm in? Because I used to drive a stick shift, and she goes, okay, what gear are you in? And I was like, okay, handle that. And so my girlfriend's like, what gear are you in? She goes, reverse. And so you could have like a sense of humor about it. Or the other thing I would tell my mom is like, Mom, this is the perfect time to get breast cancer. They built a new wing at Evergreen Hospital. Like, there's a sale going on at the local, But so I get a sense for, the gratitude piece, but tell me kind of the progression of the story on how you just kept being resilient and persevering despite all sorts of no's.
So I've been spending a lot of time really reflecting on this. So So I have this surgery. I have the tonsils out, and I'm thinking, okay, probably going to have radiation. And I go to the doctor calls me. I just want to make sure I tell the story right. And she says, Damon, the good news is we got it out of your neck, but the bad news is we didn't find it in your tonsils, which means that you now have what's known as cancer of unknown primary source, because this type of cancer emanated in the head and neck. And she says, so we don't know where the cancer is, which means that in order to make sure that it's gone, you're going to have radiation, and it's going to have to radiate your entire head and neck. And it's going to have a pretty significant impact on the quality of your life. You're going to lose your ability to taste sweets, likely, and to have taste for food. You're going to lose the ability to have saliva. You're going to have a lot of dry mouth. And there's a number of other side effects as well. And I thought, I don't like that.
Who would?
In fact, I thought, wait, I'm an engineer. I think like an engineer. How crazy is it that they would just blast my whole head with radiation in hopes that they would get it?
I'm like, can't we get a little pinpointed here?
Yeah, like I'm just like, that's just stupid. And so I'm sitting at work one day, and this is absolutely crazy to think about. And this was before they had wellness days. They were called sick days. And I'm sitting at work, and I'm feeling fine. I'm not feeling sick at all, but I can't focus on work. All I can think about is cancer. And I start beating myself up, saying, Damon, you're supposed to be at work. It's not okay to take sick time here because you're not sick. And I just couldn't get out of my head. I couldn't stop thinking about cancer. And so I thought, I have a peer that I feel that I trust, that I now call that was psychologically safe. I need to talk to somebody. And so I went to this peer and I said, I'm just struggling. I don't feel sick. I can't focus on work. I feel like I'm stealing from the company because I'm not working. I just need to talk to somebody. And she looked at me and she said, I'll never forget it. She said, Damon, you have cancer, for God's sake. You're sick. Take the time to do what you need. And I thought, oh, that's all I needed was somebody that I trusted to say it's okay. And thank God I had somebody that I trusted. Well, I immediately went up to the Commons. I opened up my computer and I started searching for cancer of unknown primary source. And guess what? I found an article. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay. I found this article from UCLA. Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
And it's a PowerPoint, and I look at this plot, and everybody's saying, well, what is that plot? I looked at that plot, and guess what? In a second, I knew what it was. That's Kaplan-Meier. That's the same plot we used to predict the Xbox 360 failure rate. I know exactly what that says, and everybody on the call is probably going to say, what does that say? What does it mean?
Yeah, please help us.
Yeah. Well, what it means is this line right here shows that after 2 years, people with cancer of unknown primary source have a 50% chance of survival.
Whoa.
Flip a coin, 50% chance that you're alive or dead. Versus this green line, 95% if it's cancer of known primary source. My heart starts racing out of my chest. I'm like, oh my God, if I don't figure this out, I'm going to die. And I knew it from looking at this plot, which was the same exact plot that we used to predict Xbox 360 failure rate and really improve the quality of Xbox 360. And so I kept looking in this PowerPoint, and then I found this. Can you still see this, Aaron?
Yep.
This thing called TORS, Transoral Robotic Surgery, and they said that they have this new way of operating deep in your tongue called transoral robotic surgery. I'm like, this is interesting. Let me keep going. And then I come across these articles, and I saw this one, robotic surgery for primary head and neck squamous cell. And I kind of glanced through it and I thought, this is kind of interesting. But then can you see this right here? I just shifted to a
I don't
different
know. You have to describe what you're looking at.
robotic surgery for primary head and neck.
Yeah, I
you
can
see that?
see the article, the original investigation.
Yeah, and so I read through this article. I'm like, this is fascinating. Oh, there's some data in this article. I wonder if I can access the data. And so there it was. I clicked it and I saw the data. I'm like, oh, wow, there's a table of data. I wonder if I can actually analyze that. And so I downloaded it and I went into Microsoft Power BI using my Power BI skills, and I built this Power BI plot based on the data that I was able to import from the PDF in that article.
Are you showing your
Yeah.
analysis?
Yeah, can you see it here?
We don't see that yet.
Okay, let me stop sharing and I'll come back and I'll share it again, okay? And so, here, let's try that.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah.
And so I thought, I built this Power BI report from that data, from that article. And I looked at it and I said, you know what? They've been able to discover cancer at primary source 72% of the time. Do you see that? Where am I?
Yeah.
72% of the time they've been able to discover it. And then I looked a little closer. I'm like, holy cow, the patients were predominantly males.
Yeah.
And they were predominantly within a couple of years of my age. I'm like, this is me.
Yeah.
The data's telling the story, right? You see the median age.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then I looked a little closer and I said, wow, where are they finding this cancer? Well, tonsil, 29% of the time, it wasn't in the tonsil. 50% of the time in the base of the tongue. Oh my gosh, I think I just found where my cancer is. It's the base of the tongue. And then they showed the sizes of the tumors here in this plot. And I'm just getting super excited, like, wow, I might not die. Here's the data. And I looked a little closer at the data. And I looked at the places that were pioneering surgery. And I discovered the University of Washington had the most cases in the study. And I realized the University of Washington is 15 miles from my house. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Right?
That's
and so,
unbelievable.
Yeah. And I'm just telling the story right now. And I'm like, how did I do that? How did I do that? And you know, Ellen, I didn't know this, but you can imagine I was filled with fear, right? I was filled with fear when I went and talked to my coworker. I was filled with fear. I literally just, I'm studying trauma a lot, and I literally just came across some research on psychological safety and trauma that indicates that when we experience fear, it has a notable impact on our IQ. As much as a 50% reduction in IQ when we're at fear, because what happens is our brain information processes from the base up, and our brain senses something. It says it's not safe, and it doesn't allow the rest of the information to go to the top of my brain, which is the cerebral cortex, which is where all of the higher order thinking happens. I couldn't, because I was so stuck in fear that day at work. If I hadn't had my coworker who I could go talk to say it was okay, significantly higher chance that I'd be dead. At the very least, that my quality of life would have been dramatically worse because so I called the University of Washington, and I get an answering machine. And I said, you know what? Another thing I learned at Microsoft is you got to find the experts, and you got to be dogged persistent. And so I called again and I got a hold of somebody and I said, can I talk with Dr. H's admin assistant? Dr. H was the pioneer that I discovered because I saw the data. They said, just a sec. And I talked to the admin. I told them the story. She said, let me talk to Dr. H. A couple hours later, she said, they want to review your case today. Now, if I had called regularly, 6 months was the waiting time. And 6 months of cancer growing, as you know, can be the difference between life and death. The next day they called. They said, we have an opening. I drove across the bridge, talked to Dr. H. He said, we have a 50% chance of finding it. I know. He said, these are the side effects. I said, I know. I've done the research. Let's do it. 3 weeks later, I'm on a gurney going into the surgery. And I said, you're going to find the cancer and you're going to cut it out. Go in, go under. I wake up the first thing. I said, did you find the cancer? They said, we found the cancer and we cut it out and it's gone. And I thought, wow. He said, literally when I was under, they opened my mouth, they had the bright lights and they looked at my tongue and they were able to see a little spot on my tongue and they biopsied it and it was cancer and they high-fived each other and they got the TORS robot and they did it. I have a Facebook and 4 hours later, I have a Facebook video that I did of me talking, saying they found the cancer. I'm going to live. I'm sorry. You can see pretty crazy. Like as I tell the story, I'm like, wow. I don't
even know what questions to ask because it's so miraculous. Did the doctor say anything? Because I'm sure you're not his typical patient.
Well, the story gets even more interesting. The doctor, of course, appreciated me and the research that I'd done. And they said, unfortunately, we're probably going to have to still do radiation. And I said, well, okay, no problem. So I went back to the original radiologist because it was close to my house. Now, the part of the story I didn't share is this radiologist, when I originally came in, said they were going to have to blast my whole head.
Right.
I said, wait, this is cancer of unknown primary source. I have a 50% chance of living in 2 years. And she says, no, you don't. And I said, yes, I do. Here's the data. And she said, no, I don't think so. I said, can you show me your data? She said, no. I said, would you please, with all due respect, would you give me a referral to the University of Washington? 2 minutes later, I had the referral to the University of Washington because I had the data and I had the facts, right?
Yeah.
Which I'd learned on Xbox 360 in my whole career.
I know. And you studied with the gentleman who created that graph.
That plot, or who was an expert in the world at creating that plot. Now, how many people would know when they saw that plot what it meant? I was just looking at it like, what's the likelihood that I would even know what that meant?
It's just
0.
It's so serendipitous, but I don't know. I don't want to get like too. Anyway, I'll just be the real me. My mentor, because not everybody believes in a higher power, but my mentor calls God a grand overall designer.
Yeah.
Even if you don't want to, call him a higher power or she, I don't even know what to ascribe it. And I mean, your story is just like out of the world. Like they're just providence. The hand of providence has to be part of it.
Well, and I appreciate that because I've talked and I'm Christian, and so God's hand's clearly been on my life. I mean, clearly been on my life, and I'm always looking for the bigger meaning in all of this, right? Always looking for the bigger meaning, and the more I reflect on it, the more I'm starting to see that. First of all, I took the blogs, I turned it into my second book, right? The very fact that I had the ability to write as I was going through it brought me a ton of relief. It brought me a ton of peace. And in one of these chapters, I actually write, I said, you know what? I read a book years ago, Emotional Equations. It says despair equals suffering minus meaning, okay? And I thought I could suffer through cancer, but if I can find a bigger meaning, then I won't be in despair. Well, my bigger meaning was this, right? My bigger meaning was I want to inspire other people that are having cancer to have a lump, to have it checked.
Yeah.
I want to inspire them to be their own advocates, that they can not only survive cancer, they can thrive through cancer. And so fast forward my story, that radiologist says, we're still going to have to blast your whole head. And I said, no, you're not. I'm done with you. I went to the University of Washington. The radiologist said, that's insanity. He said, if you've got a barn that's full of rats, you don't burn the barn down, you find a rat nest. And he said, your quality of life is going to be so much better because you did the research, because you came here. And he said, so you're about to undergo 6 months of radiation. It's going to be painful, but you're going to make it. Well, guess what? I kept riding my bike to the University of Washington. I kept believing, I kept writing, I kept having hope and positivity. I rode my bike to the University of Washington for my last radiation treatment. The doctor said, "We have never seen this in 20 years. We have never seen this in 20 years. What did you do?" I said, "I did exactly what you told me. I exercised. I did the exercises you told me." And I didn't realize at the time, but I had gratitude. Every chapter that I end this book with is gratitude. And I believe I had a reason for it. You know this, Ellen, you've been through cancer 3 times. I don't know why I was so blessed to not have the side effects. I think I don't know. I'm not saying all of that stuff is why I didn't have side effects. It might be, it might not.
So I just want to pause and reflect on something you said. It's been kind of like rolling in the back of my mind. And you're a coach, and I hope it's okay if a coach can coach a coach.
Yeah.
in our little, because part of what I want the Define Yourself program to be all about is us really having the ownership of our own locus of control.
Yeah.
And if you've ever read the book, Dr. Frankel's book, Man's Search for Meaning, and you talked about your little, equation. And something you said there, like, thank God you went and talked to your colleague and that she was supportive.
Yeah.
And I just want to kind of like, I don't know if I'm going to tell you something or ask a question, but I want you to kind of take ownership for the fact that you had it within you to seek the help at the time you needed it to someone you trusted that was most likely going to say what they were going to say. And so that locus of control wasn't outside of you. It was within you. And it was kind of part of your, because I know that you were doing a lot of coaching even before then. And so I just think that, and that's what Tiny Habits is all about. Just, having that kind of celebration. So I'm going to invite you to celebrate yourself right now.
I do appreciate that. And I'll share just a little bit about that. After I went back to Microsoft, I was able to share my story a number of times. And the number of people that came up to me and said, "I'm afraid to talk to anybody about this," it was uncountable.
Wow.
And they said, "Because you were vulnerable and shared your story, I'm no longer afraid to talk to my manager about this. I'm no longer afraid." Well, I would later do research, and I'll get to the psychological safety part here in just a sec, but I would later do research that would indicate that when an employee, and I use psychological safety and trust synonymously, I think the differences are minor, but when an employee fully trusts their manager, fully trusts their team, and fully trusts the leadership of their company, they are 14 times more likely to be fully engaged at work, i.e. productive, but they are 42 times more likely to be resilient. 42 times more likely if you have all 3 of those factors: manager, team, company.
Wow.
Whoa. Once again, I may be alive because I had a manager I fully trusted. My manager was incredibly supportive. I had a team I fully supported, and I fully trusted, and I fully trusted the company. 42 times more likely.
Wow. That's amazing. That's
the psychological safety piece that we're going to talk about in a bit, right?
Yeah, let's go there, because I really want to learn more about that. Yeah. And so you talked about yourself being a psychological safety guru, and honestly, besides your brief little definition, I don't even know, like, what were you doing training, and what was like the nature or context of the training?
Well, so I go back to it was actually almost 4 years ago to the day that I'm ready to go back to Microsoft after my cancer treatment. And by the way, I'm 5 years still cancer free, thank God. So celebrating that. 4 years. And I told my boss, I said, "There's been cancer in my life, my family 3 times. I don't want to just go back and do nothing. I have to do meaningful work. And fortunately, my manager gave me some flexibility. And he said, Damon, he said, we've been trying to figure out how to measure productivity. And given all your experience in measurement, maybe we'd like you to go do some research to figure out how to measure productivity." I thought, that's kind of fun. Let's do that. And so I go out. And by the way, I wasn't excited about it at first because I'd tried this in the past. But I go out and I try to measure productivity. And I'll still remember, I'll never forget, this was when COVID started. And so I was at home and I was really wrestling with staring at the computer screen all day. And I thought, I'm going to do something different. Microsoft is okay with us learning on our own, on their time. So I'm going to go for a bike ride and I'm going to listen to an Audible book. And so I went for a bike ride and I listened to this Audible book from Amy Edmondson on psychological safety. And she starts explaining how psychological safety is predictive of almost every productive team, right? Productive companies. It's like the hidden ingredient. I still remember exactly where I was on the bike when I heard that. I know exactly where I was. I know I can feel the sun on my face. Exactly. And I had no idea at that moment that idea would really maybe define the rest of my career at Microsoft and open up the doors for some of the most fulfilling time that I've ever had, and for my future, I believe. And so I started studying psychological safety. I'm like, this is really cool. I discovered a study from Google. I came up with the research, did the research that indicates it is the predictor of, it's the number one predictor of effective teams. It's a predictor of resilience. I told you that. It's the predictor of almost everything. And so I said, this is really cool stuff. How do I make it real? And that same woman that I talked about earlier, who I felt safe enough to go into her office and ask and talk about my cancer, she became my manager. And so she said, Damon, I want you to go do some more research on this. This is gold. And we're going to do some experimentation. And so we started experimenting with psychological safety. We started experimenting with some tooling. I put together this workshop. I gave this workshop a couple times, and people are like, this is awesome, right? This is awesome. And so organically, this thing started growing, and people started inviting me to do these workshops. I found a person that built an add-on for Azure DevOps, which is part of a Microsoft tool. Said, hey, I got this idea for this add-on, modifying the retrospective add-on, and we built psychological safety into it. Now, all of a sudden, this thing is available to 65,000 organizations in the world. And I'm in a connect cycle with my manager, and she says, Damon, I have a vision for you. I want you to become the psychological safety guru at Microsoft. I want to support it. You're doing this. And so I had the freedom there for 3 years to continue to learn, to continue to grow. And more and more time that I went, the more positive feedback I got on my teaching and my workshop and the ideas, the more feedback I got on how transformational the ideas really were quickly. And guess what I did? Because we built it in the tooling, now I had the anonymous data behind psychological safety. And so then I began analyzing the data, and we can talk about that again. I've been talking a lot, but that's kind of how I organically became known as the psychological safety guru at Microsoft.
And so what was like the nature? Do you have like kind of the high level, like topical points? Like you're doing, I don't know if it's like a 1 hour training.
Fundamentally, psychological safety is the absence of fear.
Oh.
It's we've talked about this. One of Deming's 14 points was eliminate fear in the organization.
Right.
It's the absence of fear. And it turns out that what happens, and I learned this since I've left Microsoft, but what happens is when our brains sense fear, sense that it's danger, it literally shuts down the rest of our brain from being able to process. And so if there are people on a team or in a company who have any fear, it hinders their ability to think and act in ways that to their full capability. And they're just locked in. They're just trapped. It's just locked in.
You and I are definitely, we need to have a post conversation, because all of a sudden I like to do synthesis. And so that the way I describe it, and when I was a solution manager at Microsoft, I did this, and also subsequently at Costco. But imagine like 10 different puzzles. Yeah. What I would do is I'd take pieces from each of the 10 different puzzles and build a brand new picture. Yeah. And I didn't necessarily do it with data like you do. You're like a data wizard, whisper. But what I all of a sudden thought of is, if you combine even the psychological safety with just general, and this is a framework, People are very complex. But if you take a look at the DISC personality profiles, there are some behavioral analysis, and that is context dependent, by the way. And they have some very interesting fears. Like I'll just be vulnerable and open here. And that is that I'm a DI. So a DI and DISC. Ds are dominant, they drive, they seek problems because they want to figure them out. They also like a lot of top line, like bulleted summaries. So they're not necessarily the data guru that you are, although I do have a lot of C in me. But they do have some fears. Like they have a fear of being taken advantage. And their fuel, I don't know, it's a little different than fear, but their fuel is not getting results. And so if they're in an organization where they don't feel like they can make a difference and they act, they're task oriented. They're not as much on the people side. And this framework, but anyway, so there's just a lot of connections that I'm building just through what you're just discussing right now.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. And, just to kind of build on what you're saying. So the research, if you dig a little bit more into the research, it turns out that measuring this thing called engagement, employee engagement, is a very strong predictor of employee productivity. So if you can imagine engagement is how the way I think about engagement is that I'm at work and I have a choice. I can be doing something or I can pick up my phone and scroll Facebook, right?
Yeah.
If I find myself picking up my phone and scrolling Facebook, I'm probably not very engaged at work. But if I'm working on something that is so compelling that I'm not even drawn to something like that, I'm probably engaged. Well, the research would indicate that there's a continuum of engagement. And the highest continuum of engagement is what's called inspiration. And an inspired employee is 2.25 times more productive than a merely satisfied employee. You can get 2.25 times more out of an inspired employee than you can a satisfied employee. Well, if there's fear, there's no inspiration. If it's not psychologically safe, there's no inspiration. You can't achieve that productivity. And so you dig a little deeper in the research, and guess what you find? The strongest factor in employee engagement is whether or not they fully trust their manager. An employee that fully trusts their manager or is fully psychologically safe with their manager is 14 times more likely to be fully engaged. But if an employee only partially trusts their manager, it's the same as if they don't trust their manager. So net, about 70% of the variation in employee engagement stems from the level of psychological safety they have with their manager. It's the strongest factor beyond anything else.
It's so crazy just kind of sitting where I am right now because, I've been doing and reaching out to colleagues like yourself who I just really have been impressed with. And I just finished posting an interview today, which I don't know if you saw it on LinkedIn, RJ Grimshaw. And he's got this whole amazing story about how he really just accepted. He did a lot more than acceptance. He drove as a CEO of a company, the adoption of an entrepreneurship culture at Unify, and he went from 13 million to 150 million dollars. And what you're saying, it kind of resonates to me because it's well, engagement, you can say that, I kind of like to think of it almost like, management can kind of unleash the talent. Because someone once told me this. Have you ever seen an unengaged person after work hours? And normally the answer is no. And so what does that mean? There's something about the environment, and then John Maxwell calls it the law of the lid, which is kind of a leadership lid, and I learned the hard way because I'm such a doer that I can't completely overcome the law of the lid. I can work for a manager, a director, or a VP that their vision has a ceiling. And even if my vision's different, I don't have their ability to decide how to spend the resources and much other things. And so there's still a lid. And so this idea of entrepreneurship, I think it could be kind of coupled with the safety, the trust can be this amazing awakening of productivity and positive contributions of employees and managers who thought they were, or maybe even senior managers and directors who think they're the only one who can make this kind of decision. You can delegate the decision making. You can, with guidance and stuff like that. So I kind of put this all to kind of in a gestalt and think there's such a better way. There's such a better way.
Very similar ideas, and I think that you'd ask what psychological safety is. That I took Amy Edmonds' work. She had 7 questions, and I said we can't ask 7 questions. Let me just merge them into one. So the question we ask is, I feel safe, and I do not fear making mistakes, raising tough issues, or asking for help. Scale of 1 to 10, right? And that's our surrogate for psychological safety. Well, I feel safe. I do not fear making mistakes. Well, guess what? If I'm running a company that is dependent on new ideas only come through making lots and lots of mistakes. And so if it's not psychologically safe, I don't have the ability to make mistakes. How am I going to innovate?
Well, it's so crazy. Did you, Jeff Bezos, I just saw a quote he has. I don't know when he said this or not, but it was something like, his philosophy for decision making is it irreversible?
I love that.
I thought it was amazing. And then I'm also kind of in my Gestalt view and picking my little puzzle pieces through Scrum and Agile software development, which I've been involved in for 15 years. What is that? That is small teams with delegated self-organizing. So they have to trust each other, and they figure out how to do that with Scrum Masters and a whole bunch of other, but it's ultimately, and they do small mini experiments of 2 or 4 week increments, and they create working software. And so they have the ability to be psychologically safe in their 2 or 4 weeks, increments to do what they've been given to do. And they're focused on it. There's also not a whole bunch of other, like, the Scrum Master is supposed to keep them from being pulled away and things like that. And so, I mean, we have, I think, real world examples, like Agile, of doing exactly what you're suggesting, and it works.
Yeah. Ellen, I didn't know that you were going to talk about Agile, but the other thing I do is I'm an Agile software development coach. and so to round out this picture, and you brought it up, so what the heck? To round out this picture, at the end of every sprint in Agile, the team reflects and asks themselves the question, what could we do differently to improve? Well, that reflection exercise is called a retrospective.
Oh yeah.
I happen to be in a retrospective with one of my mentors about 15 years ago, and he did it a little differently. He started the retrospective with a question: how safe do you feel on this team? And I remembered that. I remembered the impact, and I thought, I wonder if we could build that question into the retrospective tooling in Azure DevOps so that it would enable people to know if it was safe enough to actually talk about what went wrong. Because a retrospective without psychological safety is waste. And so that's when I reached out to the person, and we built that into the tooling. And what we discovered is 60% of the teams have at least one member that does not feel psychologically safe from the data that I pulled from that. And the other thing that we discovered is that, and this is a geeky conversation, but in order to improve the only way to improve psychological safety is for the team itself to identify the factors that make it not psychologically safe. But if it's not psychologically safe, the team itself isn't going to say what's making it not psychologically safe.
Which is why they need coaches, mentors, outside, neutral facilitators to come in, and then you and I have opportunity to add value. So I'm sorry, we've just gotten so into this conversation. I mean, I'm not sorry about that, but we're running out of time. So I'm going to switch into my D mode of get us really quick to the end here, because I want to give a chance for people to know how to reach you. So very quickly, you got about 30 seconds to a minute. Tell me about your book.
Yeah, honestly, I think I just talked about it. The book Pain Drives Change is really about, it's about a paradigm. And the paradigm is that when it's more painful to stay the same than it is to change happens automatically. And it's a paradigm for change in life. It's a paradigm for change in the organizational culture. So if you get that paradigm, all of a sudden pain isn't as painful. And I can see it as an opportunity to change, because the change is going to happen automatically. It's my journey. It's my story of life. And I built an organization, Change University, to help men basically overcome a lot of pain in their lives and really transform their lives. Built an organization called Change University, and the foundation of Change University, guess what? What we discovered? Psychological safety.
Yeah.
All
And
that our secret ingredient at Change. Yep.
Couple that with tiny habits and you're on your way. Because the thing about it, I always tell people, is that motivation will eventually run out. But if you look at BJ Fogg, and you and I think of pictures, someday I'll interview myself about that. But anyway, it has, you know, if you can build the ability, and if what you're doing is really, really small, you don't need almost any motivation. Because if, you know, if on the way to doing the marathon, you're going to do like one sit up, you know, as example, but put your shoes on, you know, and that's kind of what happens over time. But so
well, can I speak to that just real quickly?
Sure.
Because that was my paradigm in how do I make psychological safety real? I have to make it easy. It was BJ Fogg's Make It Easy. How can I make it easy? I can build it on a ritual that agile teams already do.
Exactly.
They already do this. Okay, how can I make it even easier? I can build it into the tooling that they use to do this. And so I built it into the tooling, and as a result of building it into the tooling, it made it available to 65,000 organizations.
That's so amazing. I just love that. So
that's Tiny Habits.
I know, it's awesome. So really quickly, here, I think I might have two things for you guys in the audience. He's got two different books, so pick up one or both. And then it's Pain Drives Change and Apathy or Action. And then also, if you want to reach out to Damon, you can find him out on LinkedIn. Damon, you've just been an amazing guest. You and I could have made this a 2-hour program. Maybe we'll do part 2 at some point.
I have a crazy idea.
What?
I have a crazy idea. We could come back and we could reverse the tables, and you could talk about tiny habits.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, maybe.
I love Tiny Habits is a fantastic.
Yeah, it's so amazing. So here's our little ending scene, and we'll see all you guys in the next episode. And thank you, Damon.
Thank you so much, Ellen. This is a blast.